Mackenzie Johnston with Tri-State Livestock News, bringing you discussions concerning fair cattle markets. Today we have the opportunity to chat with Jacob Wingebach of Mullen, Nebraska. He is one of the owners of Sandhills Beef, a small processing plant located in the heart of the Sandhills. Jacob, to start off with, can you just tell me a little bit about your background and a little bit about Sandhills Beef?
Originally from Kansas. I have a degree in systems engineering from Annapolis. And after I graduated Annapolis, I went to the Navy Nuclear Power Program. So I'm a qualified engineer in the Navy Nuclear Power Program. And then I got out and I worked in California for a year. I worked for Kiewit out of Omaha for 18 months. And then I realized that you get paid more for what you know how to do, especially if it's a specialized field, which nuclear power is. So I went to work for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Actually went to work for the government as an inspector or in the inspection program. And then I became a qualified inspector. And I was the resident inspector at Fort Calhoun Station. My job literally was to keep people safe in the commercial use of nuclear power. And I did that for 6 or 7 years. I actually have a very substantial background in enforcing the Code of Federal Regulations from the regulator standpoint, which is what makes what's going on all the more interesting. So anyway, to be honest with you, I got tired of the regulatory crap. My oldest child is autistic. 2010, 2011, I had diagnosed. We always knew it was different. So we really got into food. We tried to get organic. We tried to vote with our dollar. And then the more, you look into it, the big business has taken over a lot of those niche markets and forced out the American producers by undercutting the costs. And I'd always wanted to learn a trade. I mean, I went for education. I did sports. Sports got me my education. And I always thought it'd be cool to work with my hands. And we had some meat cutting in the family, and my dad had cut meat as a young man. So anyway, we were trying to find a particular type of food product, meat product we wanted to serve our kids. And you couldn't find it. It's like, well, why can't you find it? So I did some digging, and it turns out it's an infrastructure issue. There's not enough meat packing plants. Mm-hmm. During that time when I was doing that research, I was actually working with the last owners of this facility, trying to help them move meat in Omaha just because I was interested. I wanted to have a butcher shop, like an old school butcher shop. I didn't want to own a slaughterhouse. But then I started thinking about it. It's like, well, where are you going to get your meat processed at? It just seemed like a big gamble to go through the risk of opening a shop and wanting to source a particular product but not having access to it. And it's like, well, a guy can live and die by his morals, right? So I thought, well, I was kind of done with regulations. I had never cut a steak or killed a thing in my life. So we drove out to Mullen, and this place had been shut down for about 2 years. So this didn't happen this was like a 3 to 4 year process. I tried to work with the outfit before. They had a very similar idea. They just didn't have the execution. Because what I've learned is, I don't know if are you a cattle person?
Yep, sure am.
So here's what you guys need to understand. The way you're going to find a market is you have to collaborate with people who are going to do the meat processing. And the reason is the reason we have the meat distribution system we have today is because it's the cheapest. But being the cheapest is what has screwed you guys. At the grand old age of 41, it took me 7 years to learn a lot of this stuff. Because your traditional custom packing plants that you guys go to, all that work's done on the saw. So it actually will limit the amount of volume they can do. If you cut that way, you're not going to be able to do the kind of volume unless you basically just build a big place and you replicate that a number of times within the place. The way the big packing houses do, with everybody making one cut, that's the most efficient way to do it. But to do it that way, you can't offer a niche product. You could, and that's kind of what we're doing. Because the difference is the size. When you look at the physical capital cost to build these places, to run enough volume through them when everybody only makes one cut, the volume has to be substantial. So it's actually the way the meat's being cut is what's driving the cost. I'm not saying it's the way that the meat's cut as much as it's any other particular decision. Like if you say, hey, we want to run X volume or we want to spend X dollars, I mean, everything boils down to dollars, right? But the trade of cutting meat is not what they do in big packing houses today. They make one cut. You don't cut meat unless you have an affinity for it. Yep. Or, you're getting paid real well. And see, that's what I have to do with our folks. And I got guys getting paid $50,000 a year. Anyway, getting back to the whole point is if you dry age the product and you bring back true competitiveness and a butchering industry, which has been decimated since boxed beef came around, that was the reason that happened. And the reason it happened was to remove that labor cost, to make the product cheaper. But what people don't understand then is when you do that, there's a whole industry that young men and women could have aspired to and made a decent wage by the fruits of their labor that's gone. I mean, that's the real story here. And then when you couple that with all the problems we're facing in rural America that, like, I'm working on or trying to work on, I mean, I have a whole other cooler that I could turn on that would store 100 beef. I could double my production if I could go out and hire meat assassins, get on some Facebook groups and be like, hey, look, I'll pay 70 to 85K a year for the best of you. I could do that, but I've got nowhere for anybody to live.
Right. Finding a viable workforce here in rural Nebraska or rural America is an issue for a lot of businesses. So I'm guessing you have issues with this, and how do you go about finding folks to work at your processing plant?
I've been pretty vocal, or I had been until recently, until we've been getting clobbered, and I just try to find time to sleep. But before all this COVID stuff happened, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know if I was going to be open the next couple months. I busted my back in June of 18 and shut the plant down for about 4 months. And at the time, it was just my family working with me, and they all kind of bugged out. So I actually thought long and hard about walking away. What I do to answer your question about the labor, because I haven't answered that, I start folks at $16 an hour. And that's not a huge amount of money, but around here, that's a decent chunk of change.
Can you tell me about the issues you've been having with the USDA and becoming USDA certified?
Well, so I'll be honest with you, I'm crusading. And what I mean by that is I could change a couple things and they'd give me a grant of inspection. I know what they've given other plants. Yeah. So if they don't give it to me, it's just because they don't want to staff the position. That's a completely different issue. But what I'm crusading against is regulatory overreach, because the things that they want me to change in order to get that grant of inspection, okay, so let's assume I'm in a more populated area. I change those few things and I get that grant of inspection. I would have to get it by putting stuff in my program that's not required because it's what they want. It's not what they're legally allowed to enforce. It's become a culture. And I know this because I worked in the government. Like, I worked on the nuclear side. The Federal Meat Inspection Act hasn't had a major revision since the early 60s. Big companies like Costco and Sam's Club, like, the volumes they move. Well, so there's a story about this, and my consultant, Michael, the guy who's spearheading most of this stuff, there's a story about this. Like, they went in, and they were like, well, we're going to do this. The government's like, well, you can't. And they're like, okay, well, here, we'll spend all this money to meet your rules. And the government thought, this is going to open up a can of worms. We're just going to exempt you. So they get exemptions from federal inspection. Because there's a rule in the code. Every grocery store is limited to a volume they can sell. But the USDA never goes into the grocery store. Like, as an example, I have a license from the Nebraska Department of Agriculture that says I'm the equivalent of a grocery store. That's so I can sell meat products. I mean, I could do a lot more things. I'm planning to do a lot more things than that. But them pulling boxed beef out of the cooler is no different than me pulling a carcass out of my cooler, because they both have the stamped inspection on it. But there's a dollar amount that's in the code because they're selling under what's called retail exemption, and didn't just exempted from that. So they wanted us to do all this stuff. I don't even remember all the details. There's a timeline.
So you now have a hearing scheduled to deal with these issues, correct?
Well, we decided to forego the hearing and just go on written information. They submitted theirs, I submitted mine. Now they got to come back again, and then judge gets to decide. I figure it's about 50-50. But here's the beautiful thing: I win either way. Because even if they don't agree with me, my expectation is I could be wrong. But let's critically think here. If I'm going to court and I'm going to be told why I didn't get a granted inspection, it should come out clearly what I didn't do correct. Then all I have to do is amend my documentation. Even if it's something I didn't want to do, even if they don't agree, now I at least know what I got to change. See, the difference was they just keep stringing you along and stringing you along and stringing you along until finally, if you're in a location, because here's the thing. They would have to assign an inspector here permanently. I love it here, but it's like our state motto, right? It's not for everyone. So you got to find somebody who wants to live in this area. And in the interim, you got to detail people. And you're short-staffed anyway. So now you're spending a fortune on per diem and lodging and meals and this and that. And you're trying to find somebody who wants to live out in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska. And oh, by the way, the government ties SES bonuses, the senior executive service, basically the vice presidents of the different federal agencies' bonuses to their budget.
This hearing is going to happen, and they're going to basically lay out what needs to be changed, and then you'll be able to make those changes, and then you'll become USDA certified.
They're going to weigh the complainant's information and our information, and they're going to give us my expectation as a legal ruling on the issues. And, okay, so here's the other thing I didn't mention. We put in the most bare bones, meet the rules, meet the letter of the law application for a grant of inspection that you could ever put in. Stripped down, like this is all anybody needs to submit if they do it this way. And that was intentional, because then we have a replicatable process. Once that's approved, you can just go, okay, listen, we're cradle scanning. Here's your points of interest because here's your playbook. And see, what we did in that is there's ambiguity in the regulations. And see, these things they ask for them to do, like these extra things, these other plants will just change so they can get their grant, that shouldn't be in the enforcement part of the code at all. Because they voluntarily put it in there, they get to hold it against them, and they're the things that have ambiguity. So we define that ambiguity, and we're allowed to do that. We presented why we were allowed to do that. We presented a great legal argument and basis for the other things we did, why we defined it the way we did, and they just know that they'll lose their little hammer. It's a matter of government being too powerful. It's an ego and id thing.
So since this virus came about and basically our food supply chain fell to pieces, we've seen the Direct Act, the Prime Act, and the Ramp Up Act come about. What are your thoughts on those?
I've looked at some of them. I'm not an expert on any of them because my personal feelings are any more regulation is bad. All we need to do is people get behind what I'm trying to do and say, look, it's okay. We just need to make them enforce it the right way because it's not hard to slaughter meat. Let's be honest. Butchering animals is probably the second, oldest profession behind ladies of the night. And everybody's been eating meat. And furthermore, because they're understaffed and underfunded, it's preventing commerce. It's preventing Americans, entrepreneurs, guys that have to be good in math, but maybe didn't need to go to college because they don't like people telling them how to think, and they're going to figure out their own damn way. They're going to go cut meat because that's what they want to do. Well, they can't because of all these freaking rules, and they say it's about food safety, but it's not. It's a method of control. You go talk to some of these old boys, and I've been trying to talk to them for years about new ideas, and they all want country of origin labeling. Look, I get it, but it ain't going to solve your problem. You don't have access. They will find a way because they have the access. Butchering is what you need. You have to change your mindset. You have to start selling direct to the consumer again. That's the only way. I don't care if you think that we had a couple good years, call it a decade, because of country of origin labeling. Great. But you guys, if you don't get in the consumer's hands soon, they're pushing everything else in front of you guys. They're trying to integrate y'all, just like everything else.
Do you think there's a chance we've done permanent damage to beef demand because we saw such gouging at the meat counter when the COVID-19 pandemic hit this spring?
No. A couple of years ago, I don't remember when it was, the beef got super high. And it wasn't the shock that it was. I mean, we had this shock, and there was a reason, a logical reason. So to the consumer, they're like, oh, well, they shut down these meat packing plants, so supply and demand, even though the producer and the people in the biz know there was no supply and demand issue. But the consumer doesn't know that because we have this presumption in America that what you see on TV is true.
Do you have any thoughts on our big four beef processors being investigated by the DOJ? Do you think anything's going to come of that?
No, at the end of the day, if you see the way our government operates, they're involved. And they act like, Republicans and Democrats are so different. Well, there's some good Democrats and there's some good Republicans. You know what? I don't blame them. I really don't. Because why not? This is America. Who's stopping them? We're supposed to stop them. We're the people. We're the government. But we don't. We say, well, it's somebody else's responsibility. We don't take responsibility. We want to pass the buck. So, no, I don't think anything's going to come from this. The USDA released that report, basically said nothing. It said this doesn't preclude the idea that it could have happened. This is because you'll shut up for a while and we won't have to. We can just kick the can down the road.
How many head per week do you guys process?
Right now we're getting through about 2021. We can actually kill more than we can process. We're just struggling to get through it.
Do you have any closing statements you'd like to make or anything else you'd like to touch on regarding the issues you've had with the USDA and your processing plant?
I'll be honest with you. I'm not mad at the USDA. They just need to be shook up really good. Get on the side of America first. Just get on the side of, hey, if people want packing plants, quit jerking them around. And that goes to Congress to appropriate enough funds. And if you're paying somebody, these meat inspectors, you go online, go to usajobs.gov, you can see how many hundreds of openings they have for meat inspectors. Well, they don't pay them shit. And that's honestly even more insulting. Really, you're going to pay a guy that may or may not have a college degree to come make sure meat's safe in my plant, and I have a PhD in nuclear engineering, and not to mention, like I own a place, you really think there's anybody else who has more of a vested interest in making sure that people do not get sick than me? No. And even with this pandemic going on, there was no concern to rush it up or get any answers. It was like, nah, we'll just do what we always do. And sorry, Mr. Wingebach, here would be the most important thing that I want to get out there, because this is the answer for y'all. And I'm not saying that I'm the smartest person out there, but I don't know a lot of people with my background who have done what I've done. So maybe I might have a unique perspective. Mm-hmm. But I just want people to look at this. Ranchers don't have the time. I get it. They're already strapped. I get it. The ones that say they want to buy a meat packing plant, they get big dreams and they want to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into these massive things. But they'll never compete. You'll never compete with the big boys. You never, ever will, because they have all the cards. But if you start these smaller plants, the ones that do, let's just say 50 head a week, let's say they do a potload a week, maybe they even do a potload a day. And that's even dry aged. This is a niche product, not commodity beef. This is dry aged beef. I have the numbers that show that that can be a good business model. And what I'm willing to do is say, listen, my company will buy and renovate the packing plants. Your company will lease them. So we will get them up to code. We will provide you with all the documentation you need to gain a grant of inspection. If you want my company to run it, if you want us to staff it, we'll do it. And then we'll provide you with the information, and you have price control now. If you want to run it yourself, run it yourself. But that reduces the risk for the producer. But it provides the processor with assurance that they can hire as they need to. And the biggest cost is labor. But what you're doing is proving a business model. The folks that are running 80, 90 head through our plant right now, they were shocked. They were like, well, I guess we'll try to sell some. But they had kids who knew more about the internet and marketing, and then all of a sudden they sold 10. Sold them in 2 days. They went, holy crap. And then they put out another 10. Those sold in 3 days. Next thing you know, they sold 50. So why can't processors and producers work together like that? So here's the other thing. In the Farm Bill, there's something called the Value-Added Producer Grant. And that's a $250,000 matching grant. There's something also called LAMP, the Local Area Marketing Agriculture or something. I don't know. If you Google LAMP, they haven't got, or at least last time I checked, USDA hadn't gotten documentation out about it, even though it's almost 2 years old. But they still talk about the value-added producer. And producers, see, I couldn't get it because I'm not a producer. I don't raise livestock. I don't raise, any kind of agricultural product. I provide a service, so I can't get these. But a producer group could apply for this grant, and they could use that grant for operating costs to lease a packing plant. But you got to get moving down the road because these grants come up once a year. So what I'm saying is, there's money to do it. You got a guy who's been trying to do it for 6-7 years and is about ready to get something off the ground and says he wants to do it in other places. Quit talking about Prime Act. Hey, if that happens, great. But have you really seen how our legislature works? I'd like to think we'll get the Prime Act passed, but why not work with what we have? My hearing thing's coming up pretty soon, and like I said, I think I got about a 50-50 shot. Matter of fact, if I'd have had some more support from these ag groups, it's like, y'all don't understand what I'm trying to do. If I win, it's so good for you